Hola, estamos aquí en un nuevo episodio del podcast de Voces Megas y hoy vamos a hacer serie Tu Voz Americana, así que quédate aquí conmigo porque el podcast hoy no va a ser en español, va a ser en inglés. Así que sobre todo para los que tenéis ya un nivel intermedio avanzado, este podcast es para vosotros porque mi invitada hoy es Kayla. Ella es coach de comunicación en inglés en el ámbito internacional, así que venimos a hacer un poco de conversación, por mi lado como nativa, como hablante de español, y en su caso de inglés. Y por esa razón aquí en YouTube sí que os voy a poner subtítulos en español para que los sigáis sin problema, pero los que estáis solo escuchando, que sepáis que podéis veniros a YouTube y ahí tenemos subtítulos para seguir el podcast. Así que con esto le doy paso a Kayla, la invitada de hoy, donde vamos a hablar sobre el tema de oratoria y comunicación y las diferencias culturales que hay a la hora de educarnos en oratoria, porque a muchos de nosotros, como hablantes de español, al menos este es mi caso, yo nunca me han educado, o sea, yo en el colegio nunca tuve ninguna clase de oratoria, todas las actividades que hice tipo teatro fueron más extraescolares, pero no fueron en lo que es lo que me ofrecían a nivel educativo. Nos pasa a muchos de nosotros, es eso, que llegamos a la formación, ¿no?, en el tema profesional y decimos, sí, pues toda esta parte de habilidades de comunicación, y nos da la sensación de que nos estamos comunicando de forma que no es tan efectiva. Podemos pensar que es porque no lo hacemos bien o no se nos da bien, y es que no nos han entrenado en ello. Y más cuando ocurre con el caso del inglés, que muchos pensamos, es que más clases de inglés, más gramática, cuando si estás en un nivel intermedio, vas avanzado más en temas, si eres una persona que lideras equipos, si eres manager o estás avanzando en el mundo del management, ¿no?, de un rol más junior a uno más senior, o si eres emprendedor, para ti la clave está en oratoria y comunicación, y vas a entender mucho mejor en el podcast de hoy por qué. Así que nos vamos a pasar ahora al inglés. Yo voy a hacer también el cambio al inglés. Nos vamos con Kayla. Kayla, bienvenida al podcast. Welcome. Hi, so today I have Kayla with me. She's an English communication coach, and we're gonna talk about communication, oratory. So the first thing, Kayla, thanks so much for being here. So the first thing, please introduce yourself, tell us about you, what is it that you do, and yes.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Anna, and thank you for having me back again on the podcast. It's a pleasure. So I am originally from upstate New York, and I came to Spain again after having some travel experiences here when I was younger. I moved here officially in 2018. So I've been here for nearly 8 years now. And in that time, I ended up setting up a communication coaching business. And what I do is I help leaders, especially international leaders that are working in global companies or international entrepreneurs that have audiences across different cultures. I help them to refine and work on their English accent, voice, fluency, to find what I like to call their own vocal signature. We all have a written signature that we, are proud of, or maybe we want to work on. Maybe we don't like it so much and we want to improve it. We all have our way of communicating. So when you're talking about your communication, we each have our own signature as well. The things that are very characteristic of us, the things that we like. And then we might find things that we want to improve that will help give us better opportunities or better experiences in our conversations or in our professional life. So I like to help people design their communication signature for themselves. What do they want it to be? Because we have a lot more options than we think we have. And a lot of people feel that they are stuck in the way that they've always communicated, especially when they're doing it in another language. So I love to help people break through those barriers and define for themselves what kind of voice and communication they want to use.
So that's the first thing that you just said, like helping people with their vocal signature. I love that, like their vocal communication signature. So going into the conversation on oratory, public speaking, education. So for many of us in Spanish-speaking countries, I think mostly, we have not had any really formal education or training in schools on these skills. And I think in the States it's a little bit different. So the first thing I encounter many times with professionals is like they think they need more English classes. In the case of, for example, when you train communication skills in Spanish, people more or less know public speaking, oratory, communication. They more or less understand what is it that they are going to work around when they do that. But in the case of English, I think many people in our country or in Spanish-speaking countries, they don't realize how a communication coach or training their communication for international environments, what is kind of the difference. And I think it's rooted also in the fact that in our education, there is not a lot about that training on these skills. So I want to know a little bit more about your background in that, or what you notice is kind of the main difference. And maybe if you tell us about your experience, and then I tell you about my experience training in these skills, we can see more or less the difference there.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think?
So we, in the United States, there's always I would say as like the one thing that I notice is that there has always been an opportunity to practice public speaking. Whether you necessarily wanted to or not, public speaking was always a thing that existed ever since I was very young. I had the fortune of being able to go through various education systems. I went for a couple of years to a private school in Ohio when I was younger. Then I was homeschooled for a couple of years. Then I went to public school for the first time in fourth grade. So I was 9 years old in North Carolina. I was in that public school system, which is different in each. I was younger. Then I was homeschooled for a couple of years. Then I went to public school for the first time in fourth grade. So I was 9 years old in North Carolina. I was in that public school system, which is different in each state. That's something that maybe a lot of people don't know. Each state has its own laws for schooling. So there might be slight differences that exist in curriculum or kinds of classes you take. And then when I was 16, halfway through high school, I went back to upstate New York, which is where my family is originally from. And I finished high school there. And then I went to college in upstate New York. So throughout all of these experiences, I had private school, homeschooling, 2 different public schools, and university. And there always was some sort of opportunity in each one of those to stand up in front of the class and talk about something. It started, my earliest memories are in like kindergarten and preschool, when you would have show and tell, which I actually don't know. You can tell me if that's a thing that exists here in Spain. But for kids, you would take your favorite toy or your favorite thing from home. You would bring it to class for a day, and you would have your couple of minutes during show and tell to say what it was, why you liked this thing, how it meant something to you, why it's important. And so ever since I have memories of anything, I was able to stand in front of a class of people, of peers, and tell them why something mattered to me. And that's something that when you're so young, I think it becomes very ingrained within you. There are a lot of people that don't like that experience, even though they do it for their entire lives. So there's always the person that doesn't want to stand up and speak. But every year of my life, through all of the education systems I experienced, there was always an obligation to stand up and give some sort of speech or presentation, which I think really created a strong base for me of feeling more comfortable than others might feel when it's time to get up on a stage or just share your ideas in front of other people.
Yeah. And also you have debate clubs and like this kind of things, right? Like Toastmasters, or like there is this it's a part of the curriculum in where when you study in high school, maybe like you have to, as you say, they are kind of forcing you a little bit into doing those things, training your skills for communicating to an audience.
Mm-hmm.
No?
So the things I mentioned so far were like, let's say the mandatory things you had to do, the stuff that, okay, you will always have to give some sort of presentation. You will have to stand up and speak in front of the class at some point. And that happens pretty regularly throughout the mandatory education. Then there's this whole multitude of things that you can do in extracurriculars, which you said you got more of your experiences from extracurriculars. But the thing I find interesting from extracurriculars in Spain versus in the US is that in the US, the majority of the extracurriculars are still connected to the school system. So it's something that you can join for free after school, and you would just stay at school for an hour, 2 hours longer. The same as with sports. Sports was always a free thing that you could join as a part of school, which provided a lot of opportunity for people to try things that maybe I see them less let's say they experiment less in Spain because it's something your parents have to sign you up for, you have to pay for it, which you can find those experiences as well, especially for sports in the US. But normally it's when a child decides to become very competitive and they have one thing that they really want to go all in on and focus on. So even if you don't know and you're just kind of experimenting what you want to do, there are things like debate club. I never had debate club at my school. I did other things that are similar, but some things that exist are debate club, mock trial. Mock trial I had at my school in New York. And this is where everyone gets a fake case, like a trial case. And you have to go to a courthouse, like a real courthouse with a real judge.
Fun.
And you have to defend the case with other people from the school. So you're given a special role. You have to be a lawyer, a defendant, a plaintiff, a witness, and you have to train for it and speak in front of a judge. And it's very, very formal. They treat you like in a trial.
That's so
it was one of the most terrifying things I ever did in my life. And actually, that was one of the first times I really felt butterflies, also known as anxiety, in my stomach when I had to speak in front of people, because I had to memorize an entire opening speech that needed to be very specific and very precise in order to open up the dialogue for what we were going to argue in the case. And I remember speaking to my teacher, who was the leader of our club. And I remember telling him, I said, my stomach hurts so bad, like I'm not going to be able to do it. I think I have to go to the restroom. Like I can't do this. I feel terrible. And he said, no, you're just nervous. You're just nervous. It's fine. You're okay. I promise nothing's going to happen.
Wow.
And he was right. He was right. He was the first person that gave me a perception that when your body is giving you a physical sign that you're terrified, that you have nerves, that you whatever, it's your perception of that is actually making you feel that way or reinforcing it. Yeah. If you understand physiologically what's happening and that your body is just preparing yourself for something that you see as important, you are able to go out and do it. And I did it. And I proved to myself that it was fine. I did not throw up being in front of everyone. I was okay. Wow. Even as a person who was relatively confident speaking in front of other people, I still had those moments where you're in a new situation and it's scary. So we have those extracurricular activities that are a big part of the school system as well.
That's amazing that you had those things, like the mock trials and all of those things. And I think that that's exactly the case. Like you are training the skill emotionally, like you're understanding in your body that it's part of the skill that you feel nervous or excited. Actually, the nervousness goes into excitement the moment that you understand that is part of the process. And I think that's kind of the key with the sports too, that it's the highest stress situation that you are in. And it's very curious because I actually, in my trainings, I use mock trials. Like I do that. I didn't know it was a thing. I do that because it's like lawyers and doing a trial. You have to role play so much, and you need to, because you can tell people the theory of communication, but it's when you are immersed in something that you realize how you react, because it's an emotional game. Communication is an emotional game. So that's why it's so similar to sports, in the sense that it's about how you manage the emotions, how you manage the nerves, the stress when it comes. And it's not really what you say, but how you say it and how you manage the reaction. And you can only train that when you are in a role play situation, or you are kind of put in a situation that simulates and how you respond, So I love that, that you do that when you were that age. I think it's fascinating. I love it. I find that you probably are much more prepared. I think for what you said in our country, well, what I experienced personally is that the extracurriculars, like for example, I remember I did theater, but it was outside, the extracurricular was outside of school. So we had sports as like a subject, like it was part of the curriculum, like sports, but
like
it was
gym class.
Gym class,
yeah.
Yes, exactly. We had gym class. I don't know what I watch in the American movies. That you have the cheerleaders and like the team of the high school, and then People can even have a scholarship through sports. And, I think that is not something we have here. People listening to us can comment and tell us their experience, either in Spain or Spanish-speaking cultures. Like, I personally didn't experience a lot of situations where I had to public speak or present things or like defend myself in front of an audience or things like that. There were projects. I think it's changing. I also think there is a difference with primary school. I think they have a lot of these great things like theater, all of these things. They have more of that. But I think there is a huge change when in our education system, people go to high school teenage years. I think it's more theory, maybe, or experience. I'm talking about my experience. So that's why I would love people to comment and tell us what is their experience on this. But in my experience, soft skills or communication skills, leadership skills, I don't really think they are trained. I think maybe it's changing, or emotional intelligence, all of these things. Maybe it's changing, but I think what you experience of a mock trial, all those kind of things, the fact that people can have that training before start working, it's amazing. I would love that for people.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. While you were speaking, I was wondering, because when I did education in Spain, I did my master's degree here, but I never applied for a bachelor's. So I don't know what the process is like to apply for an undergraduate degree. So when you're thinking of being competitive in the markets of like being accepted into a school, it's the same as when people are looking for a job, right? Like, you want to be the most competitive or have the best curriculum in order to get accepted into your university. So we do the same for jobs. When it comes to Spanish culture, not having all of those extracurriculars that are very common, what else is it that they use to determine whether they accept you or not besides grades? Or is it like purely grades that decide whether you get into a university?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it really depends, because it's not the same if it's a private university or it's a public university. True. Because I think public universities is more like your grade. It's more like, we have something in Spain called selectividad. So I think maybe it's changed, because I'm millennial. So it's like, please, people that you are younger than us, or comment there. But when I did it, it was an exam. So depending on the grade that you have in the exam, you can access different degrees and different universities. If it's the state university, like Universidades Públicas, like state university, and then private university, I think in that case, maybe but it's also about the money. So if you pay, so I think it's kind of different in that sense. I don't think that when I watch, because I have never been to the States, I have to, but when I watch the movies, I see, like people making these recommendation letters, and they have to do something for the universities. It's completely different.
There's like, we don't have that. There's so much that goes into it, because you have the grades. That's one thing. Your GPA, your grade point average. Then we have our equivalent of the selectividad would be SATs. So the SAT exam is like, you have scores that are considered like baseline scores that you should get to get into certain levels of university. But if you have an amazing application and your SATs are not the best, you can get into the school. So the SATs are not like the end all be all. It's not the one thing that determines. But it's very important to show in American culture that you are well-rounded, that you have like a very comprehensive, holistic experience with different things. So you want to show, okay, I wanted to highlight on my applications that I had recommendations academically from these different professors. I also had recommendations from people in the community. Different. I also had all of these things that came from sports. I also have the part that came from participating in orchestra, in marching band, and classical music. I had the leadership programs that I was a part of in high school. So it's like all of these things that you keep adding on to show that you are a well-rounded candidate that can make you applicable for scholarships and a lot of other things. But it's like a whole job to learn how to apply to school.
I get
it's so stressful for Americans. It's a big deal.
Wow, I imagine. And also the system is very different because it's more private, right? Like you have to pay for studying at a university if you want to go through that university program. It's not like here in Spain that you have the option of state universities, or like there are private universities too, but you have the option of having that education funded in a way. Is it like similar, or is it very different?
You have both. There is the state and there is the private, but both of them cost money. Like it's all going to cost money. So, for example, to give people an idea of this, because I think when I listen to podcasts or conversations, I love to hear people talk about like real examples or real numbers, because people never talk about that or say that. So I'll give an example. When I went to my school, I did a state school in New York. And based on whether something is state or private doesn't change whether it's like prestigious or not. It kind of just depends on the school. So each school has its own reputation. So there are state schools that have really great reputations, and there are state schools that don't. And the same for private schools. There are private schools that are known for letting anyone in, and private schools like Harvard. So there's a lot of differences there. And in my case, I went to a good state school that was pretty close to my home. And the full cost of going there, you live at school, or in my case, I did. You live there for the 4 years on campus. Full tuition with all of the cost of everything was about $20,000 per year.
Wow.
At the time I went. I haven't looked at those numbers. I'm sure they've gone up since then. Everything goes up, but it was about that at that time. And then you have options to get scholarships and things on top of it. But either way, people pay quite a bit for education. So it's also something you take very, very seriously if you have to pay for it yourself and you don't have your parents helping you.
Of course. So it's like you have to pay, and also on the top of that, you need to be a good candidate. It's like not only, okay, I have the money, I'm going to pay. It's that you have to compete in a way for your position with other people, and you have to like sell yourself, like these communication skills, in order to show that you are articulate and that you communicate your value well, all of those things, right?
These communication skills are essential from the start.
Wow.
So first of all, most people have already had some sort of interview when they are 15, 16, 17, because lots of Americans already have some sort of job. It's very normal to have 1, 2, 3 different high school jobs before you even go to college. So I had already had three or four different jobs before I joined my first year of college as a freshman at 18. And of course, for each one of those jobs, I had to go through an interview process. It's more, relaxed when you're a high school kid. People know that you don't have a lot of experience yet. But then as soon as you get to the college level, and some colleges make you do an interview to get accepted into the college, especially very prestigious ones like the Ivy Leagues, like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford. So you know that you're going to have to go through a pretty rigorous interview process just to get into the place that you want to study at, to then be able to later have the job that you want with the career you want and the degree you want. So learning to be good at interviewing and have good communication skills is important from a younger age compared to when Spanish people enter the workforce as a whole, from what I've observed. But not everyone has a family that necessarily pushes you to learn those communication skills. So I recognize that the fact that my mom did role-playing things and activities with me before my interviews. The first interview I ever had was when I was 10 to get accepted into a program. It was called an ambassador program. And I went with a group of kids to Australia for 2 weeks when I was 10. And there was a really big interview process with multiple phases to get accepted. So I remember my mom role playing with me. I remember her saying, okay, practice introducing yourself. Give me a handshake. How do you give me a handshake? Is your handshake firm? Are you like a fish? Like what you like you give me a good handshake. What is this going to be like? You want to give a good first impression. But not everyone has that. So if you have one of those people in your life that can help you practice with communication, it's one of the biggest things that you can leverage and take advantage of to be a step up from where everyone else is at within your career or, networking, whatever it is, if you have someone to practice role playing with you, it's the most terrifying thing you can do. No one enjoys role playing when they start role playing, but it is the thing that will help you get to where you want to go, because you'll be much more confident to actually try in those situations.
Yeah, exactly. And okay, so going into now the aspect of you meeting professionals in leadership positions, more in the European, because it's both Spain and Europe, that I think oratory and communication was more thought of as something that people do when they are politicians, or when they are actors or public figures, things like that. But common people, they don't do that. We don't train in communication skills or oratory. But actually, most professionals that I encounter, both in English or Spanish, they actually need communication skills. But in the case of English, for example, they are training more English classes, grammar, more grammar, and they have intermediate level or going advanced. And it's the moment where they actually need communication skills internationally, and it's a completely different skill. That's what you and I, we kind of train people talking about international communication skills. So I want to know what you notice from your side, coming from American culture. What is kind of your point of view on the cultural perception of this skill? Being an international, it's not just public speaking. No, hablar en público en español, but now you are a Spanish speaker, you are a Spanish speaking professional, you work in international companies, you work in tech, and you have to work with people from the States in a company in the States or with native speakers. And you think that you need more grammar and more, my pronunciation is not good. And it's not that what you need. What do you think regarding the training or the education that we have in Spain and in Europe, and coming from the States, the kind of difference there?
Mm-hmm. So this is fascinating. I think that when I came to Spain is when my perception around what the definition of oratory is or public speaking is when it changed. Because when you have to do that in a second language, you start to analyze things in a way that you wouldn't have even thought about ever in your native language, because there's certain things that just come really easily. So when you start to do it in a second language, you start to think about all these different categories of conversation or communication skills that maybe you haven't sat down to think about analytically in your native language. So what I started to notice is all of the public speaking opportunities in social environments that I did not feel capacitated for at that moment. I didn't feel ready for. I didn't feel confident for. And yes, there were times when I was at a low level that it had to do with grammar, or it had to do with a lack of confidence in the way I sounded. But then as you start to get better, you realize, okay, I feel really good in grammar. I feel really good in vocabulary. I feel really good in XYZ, but there's still something missing. And that's that public speaking oratory part that a lot of people only associate with being on a stage or speaking in front of huge audiences. But your audience can be just one person. It can be one-on-one when you're, you and me speaking to each other right now. And when someone is speaking in public and they make you feel like they're just talking to you and not to everyone, that's normally when they are the most influential public speaker. So if we think about it like that, it's not about speaking to thousands of people at a time or hundreds of people at a time. It's about those concrete moments when you're just speaking to one person. So I started to look at different categories of speaking that I could see Spanish people do really well, that I felt like were a little bit harder for me. So one was narrative and storytelling. And storytelling, which might be a little bit more common in, a stage scenario or like a TED talk. We talk about the typical storytelling things that people do. That doesn't mean that when you hear your best friend tell you a story, that they sound engaging, that they sound interesting, that they sound compelling.
Yes.
But I noticed a lot certain things that Spanish people did when they would tell stories that were different. So like exaggeration of things, like not being so literal. Americans were very literal with a lot of things we say. So the exaggeration factor, emphasizing things more than what they are, which people understood based on context, but it made it funnier. It would give it a more interesting quality, more memorable. People were much more likely to talk about things like politics or debate, but in like an everyday scenario, like a social environment. So what I would see as normal to talk about in debate club when you were in high school, I would see people talk about that over a glass of wine or a coffee out on a terrace with, no shame of who's listening to them speak or whatever. They would speak about it much more openly than what we would do in American culture. So I started to see these things that were being practiced in social environments that I had thought were things to only practice in formal environments. So I saw, okay, there's a lot more that I can do here or think about when I'm just talking to friends. It doesn't need to always be something professional. And then when you're working on that in one-to-one and everyday scenarios, you realize where you can start to leverage those same skills and apply it to your communication at your job or with your boss or in an interview.
Wow, so there's a cultural difference there in like the type of conversations that you have in America in general regarding topics like politics. It's curious that you say that because I don't think in Spain, maybe it really depends in the people or in the circle of people, because I think politics in general is like taboo sometimes, or like people don't want to talk about it, or it really depends. But it's interesting to listen your perspective on that, or what you experience, like the contrast of the type of conversations that we have here. And okay, and coming a little bit more into, do you notice that difference of like maybe the way we approach or understand this? I think it's more like a thing in the back of our heads, like when people think of oratory, like you have this impression of the politician, or like more elite, or more like something that is for some people but not for everybody, or it's not that we all need it. So for me, that's kind of the main thing, because if you think that charisma or communication or all of these things are not a skill, you think that is talent, or these people have it and I don't, or I cannot develop it. I think that's the first thing, when you realize, no, but this is something you can improve and you can become better at this. And many people put a lot of energy into, maybe you have already like a foundation that is great, like intermediate level or great foundation, and you still put a lot of effort in and energy, more vocabulary, when actually what you need is to sound more compelling, or like the confidence aspect. And it has maybe more to do with your beliefs than the thing with the accent or with the pronunciation that many people struggle with regarding their confidence. That, like, there are a lot of things regarding beliefs that have to do with the intercultural aspect, that it seems to me there is not a lot of maybe information or education on that. And the intersection of, like what people think they need regarding more academic, maybe instruction, than this skill that I think is very connected with sports. And you need to immerse and you need to actually train yourself doing a lot, like you need to record yourself, like listen to yourself, be in situations where you're with other people and receive feedback. And how you, because it's kind of the thing, you think that you're sounding in one specific way, or that your communication problem is, I have this problem with vocabulary, but then your problem is completely different. And I think that's kind of something that I notice a lot of people realize when they start training in a skill like this.
Mm-hmm. We all have confirmation bias. So whatever we believe, we're going to see more proof of that. We're going to find evidence that that is true throughout our day-to-day. And we're going to read differently, interpret differently the responses that other people give us as we're communicating with them because of our confirmation bias. So I compare this a lot, pronunciation and accent training. I compare it a lot to sports because muscle memory, but communication in general is muscle memory. It's getting used to it. So there's the thing that, let's say, if I have a belief that I have a terrible accent and no one understands me, I'm probably going to stutter more. I'm going to repeat myself more. My voice is going to shake. I'm not going to sound confident. So when someone asks me to repeat myself, it might be because they heard my intonation sound very like it lacked confidence. So they're not sure if it's a statement or if it's a question. They're not really sure. So maybe they ask me to repeat. But if my belief is that I have a terrible accent and no one understands me, then maybe I'm speaking. And as I'm speaking, I'm thinking, wow, it's true. It's true that no one understands me. It's true that I'm not clear because I'm being asked to repeat myself. But the perception of that person could be completely different. We also can find moments where people are very confident and they do need to work on a certain skill and they don't realize it. So there's people who could be overly confident in something they're not really skilled at yet, of course. But I don't think we would ever argue that a professional athlete should be recording themselves. They should be watching their film back. I did that when I played college sports. We would have film days and we would sit down and we would watch back the game. What should we do better? Let's analyze it. And we did that together as a group. We asked questions. We looked for feedback. So there's that constant analysis. If an elite athlete or even an average athlete in the US expects, okay, this is something I should do to improve, why would you not do that with your communication as well? Why would you not be recording yourself and seeing what you want to improve, analyzing it, asking for feedback from people that you trust and are in a position that you feel represents where you would like to be? Of course, I think there's a lot of people who take advice from those who have not achieved what they want to achieve, or they're not in a position to have authority to give them advice. But when it's about communication in particular, advice feels so personal that oftentimes we allow ourselves to be very influenced by what others say. So maybe I apply for a job and I get some feedback in my interview about my communication that makes me feel very negative about my capacity to communicate. But if that organization did not have a good culture of communication to begin with, and they don't communicate within the organization the way I want to communicate, then their feedback isn't even valid for me. It doesn't matter because it doesn't fit with what I want my beliefs to be. So being able to sit back and observe from like a third person standpoint, your beliefs and what you think, like what are the recurring thoughts about your communication going on in your head? Are they something that are helping you or are they tearing you down? And not judging yourself about it, just observing. What are my patterns? Because we are in our head all day, so you don't even realize what you're doing. That doesn't have to be that way. And if you take even just a couple of days of effort to observe this, you're going to notice a lot of things that you decide you don't want to accept anymore in your beliefs, and you're going to find ways to change it.
Yeah, totally. It's like a continuous process of receiving feedback somehow and like taking what's there, what I can improve. I notice in many people, the structure is a very important aspect of, and it's actually something it's very easy to start introducing little tips to give yourself more structure so you sound more clear, like the power of three, like, these kind of things that, okay, maybe you didn't know because nobody told you, but with little tweaks and things like that, you can actually very quickly improve aspects like structure and being more clear and being much more confident in the way you communicate some things. But I notice when people, for example, they transition professionally into, imagine they are in a company and then they transition into an international role, they feel very lost because many times, as you very well said with the confirmation bias, we are looking for all the things that we have learned before. And many of us as Spanish speakers and professionals and Spanish speaking people here listening, it's like our confirmation bias is what we were taught in school, that, oh, you're not good enough, your English is not good enough, and your vocabulary. And it's about the language, when it's no longer, when you're a professional, it's not longer about the language. The language is great, like you can always improve that, and vocabulary and all of that. But it's much more about how you manage your emotions. It's more this kind of elite athlete attitude that you say, of.
Yeah. It's all about what you, in the US, we're definitely more about like, okay, prove that you can do something and we'll believe it, rather than having like, let's say, the degree or the accolades, the rewards, or the awards that you win kind of thing. So as an example, people that start a business. Maybe in Spain, I have a lot of friends that when they have wanted to start a business, they would feel very conscious or self-aware about the fact that they wanted to do something that wasn't the exact thing that their degree was in. Or they think that to launch their business, they have to have a master's and a PhD in this thing. So they say, oh, I'll study for 10 more years and then launch my business. In the US, we think, okay, well, if you have these skills and you're able to launch it now and then keep learning as you go and get a degree if you need to later. And obviously, we're not talking about like being a lawyer or a doctor or something where you actually have to have a degree to do that thing. We're talking about other kinds of professions. If you're able to do that, why not do it? Why would you not do it now? And I have seen throughout my career, both in the US and in Spain, a lot of people with really great degrees that don't do a great job. And I've seen people that don't have degrees that do an amazing job, that are incredible. So my belief that I had before that you need to have a degree or you need to have a certain type of education in order to access some sort of job, that doesn't exist anymore for me. So I changed that belief, which opened up a lot more doors for what I believed that I could do or learn professionally. And now with AI, obviously changing the market so much, by the time you get a degree, how much has already changed in your profession? So I'm very interested to see what happens actually with the whole industry of education, in especially college education within the next decade. I can't even imagine how much is going to have to adapt.
Yeah, it's actually such an interesting topic. It's fascinating. I've been following, I think it's somebody in the podcast industry in the States. It's called Sinet Bobel. I don't know if you know this woman. She speaks about AI and the evolution of AI in the job market. And she has an hypothesis that I really believe in. So I'm totally on this hypothesis that the job market is going to evolve into more freelancing. Like we are going to become more like entrepreneurs, everybody, but we're going to sell our skills. And it's like, I'm going to sell, like we are going to be, imagine selling our skills for one project in this company and then another project in this other company, because there are a lot of things that AI is going to be able to do in certain like finance or like different sectors, that can perfectly be done by this technology. So maybe a lot of skills that are actually these soft skills, like communication skills, like the way you communicate on the thing that you've done, or there are lots of these that are going to be much and much more valuable as we get more into that era. that I mean, I cannot even imagine how it's gonna be, because it's like, very confusing, and we're just starting to understand. But you just see with ChatGPT and or Claude or whatever is the thing that you're using, that it's all about, even if you're a content creator using social media, it's like, yeah, you can try and let AI write for you the post or whatever, but it's not the same. And you cannot really, I don't think you can substitute communication skills, because it's the heart of communication. Like you cannot substitute great storytelling coming from a genuine place or the heart of how you communicate. You can, yes, of course, and to get more clear on how you communicate to an audience, but like the thing that really makes communication engaging and memorable, that is a very concrete skill. That is this skill that we train people in. And I don't think like you can really substitute with technology, like with AI. So it's very interesting, because I think these skills are going to be even more and more important, like emotional intelligence and communication skills and knowing how. And I think communication skills especially, and communication skills in international environments, I think it's going to be even more and more important too, because how to communicate in an intercultural background, for example, in things like pronunciation, I think there is a lot of misunderstandings of what is it that people should focus on when they are training. Is what you said, it's a muscle memory thing. So it's like, okay, what should I focus on to have a point of reference? Like, no, you should focus on intelligibility, like being understood for this reason, and then understand what is it that can help you. Because I think many Spanish speaking professionals have never trained phonetics. They don't even know what a phoneme is or why that is important for me now in my life, you know? And I think that if you work with an international company, like a lot of Americans, imagine like you go to work there or like you travel a lot to America or with a lot of native speakers. I personally think that for me, it helps me with my confidence to know that I'm sounding in an intelligible way, that I'm pronouncing the words in an accurate way. What do you think about that? Because I think I want to like debunk this myth because I think is actually from a perspective of communication, being understood, and this is pure psychology of communication, is the ease of processing. So it's like being easy to understood by the other person makes the person perceive you as more intelligent. So I think that the clearer you are for that person, the better. So how this in your perspective works? If I imagine that now I'm going to work to an American company, I'm a Spanish or an European professional, and I'm gonna work there, how like training my communication from the pronunciation perspective can help me?
100%. I couldn't agree more. There is also the other aspect that I'll mention of speaking with accent or pronunciation in a certain way is that when someone speaks like you also feel like you have a greater bond with them.
Yeah.
So the more like if you're in the US and you're hearing a bunch of English speakers and all of a sudden you hear a Spanish accent out of nowhere, someone speaking in a crowd, you're like, oh, who's that? Like, where are they? Like you immediately identify them and you feel closer to home. You feel like that person is like, it sounds like home. It feels like home. So this happened to me just the other day. Actually, I walked into the gym and there was a guy behind the counter and I thought he was the new receptionist. So I asked him for help with something and he said, no trabajo aquí. Y por ese acento, por su forma de decirlo, I said, oh, this guy's an English speaker because I could identify it. So I felt some sort of sense of closeness to him just in the way that I heard him say the words because I knew he was using English phonemes when he spoke.
Yeah.
And at first, he seemed to be doing his own thing, kind of quiet, reserved. So I left the gym and I was like, 5 steps outside of the gym. And I said, what the heck? Like, why don't I go like introduce myself to this guy and ask where he's from, whatever. So I turned back around and I went in and I said, where are you from? Like, I know you speak English. Where are you from? And he's like, oh, and his face lit up because he heard someone else speak English. And he is Australian and he's here doing an exchange program within a school. And, we got to talking and he's like, this conversation feels so good because I don't have to process. I don't have to think. And he's like, it's so tiring to be here and not have people automatically understand me or me not automatically understand them. So that processing that we feel when we're learning another language, that's the same kind of thing someone else might be feeling when they are trying to process what we say if we don't speak with intelligibility. So if I'll give an example of a client that I'm working with who is very, very confident in his social skills. He's very, very good working with people. He's from Latin America, but he's working in a US-based company. He's been in the US for a few years, but he's never thought about or worked on pronunciation until now. So he realizes that there are times when people do not understand him, but he feels really confident. So he goes ahead and he does things anyways. But he recognizes that he's losing a lot of time in quick transactions or quick interactions with clients when they have to ask him to repeat himself, even if they don't mind and they say, no, it's fine, like try again. He wants to be able to do it faster because the American work-paced environment is quite quick. So if he says words that have ed endings and he always adds an extra syllable for the ed because that's just what he got used to years ago and no one ever told him to do anything different. If he says, I feel really challenged by this role and very judged by everyone, if you're a Spanish speaker and you know why he's doing it and it makes sense to you it sounds clear. You're like, obviously he's saying challenged, obviously he's saying judged. If you are a monolingual English speaker and you have never had an experience of learning in depth another language or another language's pronunciation system, then when you listen to that, you feel confused because it's not what you automatically expect to hear. So you're like, sorry, what? You have a lag for a couple of seconds and you don't understand it. And it's not anyone's fault. It's just a different system. So if you want to leverage the system, you have to understand the system and know where to practice to make or take more advantage of your efforts and improve your intelligibility with your efforts.
Exactly. And that's why, I remember you once, one time I think it was a reel or something you share in your socials, that you were used to training people that were more actors, or like that actors are aware of this training, but many professionals, they don't, when they actually need it the same way as actors do. Because it's a communication, it's in the area of communication skill training, pronunciation, right? So many people, if they only have the focus of maybe going to English from the perspective of the language piece, they are missing on all the holistic, integral, I don't know what saying this, but all of these aspects that maybe are even more important when you are actually working, even more if you're working in an American company with people from America, or native speakers, because it could be from any English speaking country. But exactly what you say of intelligibility, it's crucial. So, for example, actors, they do a training for their roles to master a specific accent, and also it's different to master an accent than intelligibility is different. So, because it's like master an accent is so hard, so for most people, it's not even the objective, but it's like your objective is to be clear. And most of people are not training on that area. Do you notice that? Like, do you notice a lot of people don't even know that accent training is something important to train in communication when they are working internationally?
Yeah. So I'll debunk a myth for a lot of people too. A lot of people think that you only train with pronunciation if you're an actor, if you have to learn a completely different accent from your own, or if you're doing it in your non-native language. And that's not true. So two examples that come to mind. I forget her name. I'm terrible with actors' names, but the actress who played Barbie in the Barbie movie.
Margot Robbie. Yeah, I'm very good with names of actors.
Thank you. I'm terrible with names of actors because I always
don't worry. I'm very good at that.
I think of the role that they played and I remember who they were, but I don't remember their name. So she's Australian. And she said in an interview that the very first show she was ever on in Australia, it was an Australian show and everyone was Australian. They got her a dialect coach because she sounded too Australian. Like her accent was too strong. And they said that she needed to soften it because it was too exaggerated for the public that they wanted to speak to. And it's the same thing. They wanted the processing time to be easier or faster for people that were listening. So it can happen even in our native accents. And I just saw a video as well from I do remember his name, Benedict Cumberbatch. He's an English actor.
One of Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes, or the Imitation Game. Maybe was a really good movie he was in.
Yes.
So I love Benedict Cumberbatch. And he said in an interview that he has a fear of pronouncing the word penguin. And he refused in the interview. He didn't even say the word penguin. He referred to it in other words, but he didn't even actually say the word penguin. He said that he did a documentary, like the voice for a documentary for like BBC or I don't know, one of these big channels years ago. And after he did the recording for all of it, apparently he mispronounced the word penguin. Like multiple times as he was reading it. So like his pronunciation, it wasn't a mistake. It was just wrong. Like he just was not pronouncing right. The word
it is
penguin.
Because of the American accent, British accent thing, or?
No, I think he was doing it in a British accent.
Okay.
So it's something about the word penguin for him was just like a no-go. It's just like not working. I don't know why, but this stuff can happen to native speakers too. Like sometimes we have a word that's just really hard and we avoid it or we don't like it. So it's not something to be ashamed of and think that, no native speaker ever works on their pronunciation. Yeah. That's not true. A lot of people have to practice oratory because they mumble and it's not clear when they speak to people, or they talk too fast and they have to slow down because just like with accents, we have processing time of maybe understanding someone that talks different from us. Mm-hmm. If someone speaks too fast, maybe the processing time is too quick. I can't process the information fast enough because you're speaking at the speed of light and I'm learning a new thing and I need to hear you slow way down because you're my manager and this is really easy for you, but you just hired me and I don't know what the heck you're talking about. So we need to slow things down. So being able to adapt when you recognize someone needs you to go faster, needs you to go slower, needs you to speak differently, to recognize those cues and be able to adapt to it in the moment is something that we'll never be able to get automatically from AI, for example. You need to be confident enough in your skills that when it's you and another person and you spontaneously have to do something, you need to be confident that you can show up and you can do it, because that's where you're either opening a door for yourself or closing one that could have been an opportunity.
Yeah, and actually, I have the hypothesis because I haven't done the study. I will do if everybody here wants me to, but I think that the actors, thinking of the acting industry, the actors from Europe and international actors that have mastered the most these aspects of communication regarding, for example, accent, or the ones, because people say, oh, you're very good with accents, but like probably they have really trained themselves. So like, yes, maybe they have good ear, but I definitely think they have been training on that specifically. And I really believe that many actors from Europe, like if you just think about people from the UK with British accent, that they have work in their accent, like American accent, or people from Europe, they have improved their pronunciation with Imagine English, that they have a much longer, interesting career when they step into an international like roles or international world. And I think that translates the same into professional people. It's kind of the same thing. Like you just have to think of examples. Like the one that it always comes to my mind because I think it's mind blowing is Alicia Vikander, because I know the story very well of this actress that she won an Oscar for La Chica Danesa, like the Danish girl, and she comes from Sweden, from Gothenburg. So it's like the cinema industry is tiny, teeny. Like there is very, very few actors there, like very few. Imagine like coming from such a little cinema industry and having an acting career, so she had to go to like London, and many of the first movies she began in the Scandinavian cinema, very independent, and then she went to London and she mastered, like the first movie she did in Denmark. So Denmark is a different language from Swedish. So she faked the accent, like she was listening to people in Denmark, recording people, and mastering the accent. So when the director interviewed her, the director thought that she was Danish and gave her the role.
That's very impressive.
Yeah, impressive, right? And then she went to the UK and she lived in London and she had different movies there. And when you watch movies from her, you notice that maybe she's not she's not British, but because in the accent, you notice it's very neutral, but it's really intelligible. Like it's kind of neutral. You cannot say it's not a strong accent, right? From I can't tell this person is from Scandinavia or anything. So for me, I have this. Yeah, this woman knew, she mastered the accent, she mastered the communication skills. And I think that a very big part of her working international, the way that she has, like now she's one of the only Swedish actresses that had made it internationally. I really believe, but this is my hypothesis, that is an incredible actress. But I think also the fact that she works so much in her skills communicating and like imitating accents play a huge role in her international like boom,
I would take it even a step further too.
Yeah.
And I would say it's not so much the fact that she mastered it, but that she was willing to try it in the first place. Because that's the thing where people get stuck. They never even see how far they can take something or how well they can improve if they never give it a shot, if they never give it a try. And coming full circle now, I think it's one of the best things that I'm really grateful for from the American school system was that I was constantly given opportunities to try something different and just see what would happen with no impact of, if it meant that my parents were going to waste money on me trying something and I ended up not liking it, or I ended up being terrible. I could try different things and just see what happened. And it was all a big experiment. Maybe something would go really well and I would keep going. Maybe something would go really well, and even if I was good at it, I didn't like it, so I would stop.
Yeah.
There's all these options. So if you're not willing to take the first step to just say, yeah, I'll try, I'll be the first one to try, then you're not going to get anywhere. And something that I see a lot in, especially Spain, as a Spanish-speaking country.
Especially Spain, tell us.
Vergüenza, que la gente no se la
Yes,
quiera.
vergüenza colectiva, total. Y con la pronunciación, muchísima. Comentar aquí, comentarnos qué os parece eso. Yo estoy de acuerdo, creo que hay mucho de eso, sí.
Mm-hmm. Because if you never get rid of that and you say, okay, I'm just going to try. Mm-hmm. I don't really care what the result is. I'm just going to say yes. Y a ver qué pasa. Being able to do that is the first step to be way ahead of the majority of people, because most people are too scared to even try and see what would happen. So if you little by little say yes to things that are exciting for you, but they make you a little bit scared, that's a great combination to just keep pushing yourself to see how far you can go. Because it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you can watch all of these great Oscar-winning actors and actresses, or some of the best entrepreneurs, or your idols, and you watch interviews with them, and they all say the exact same thing, that they were terrified for a role that ended up giving them their big break, or they were really scared for a pitch, or they ruined a pitch that was a really great opportunity, but they learned from it and they did better next time, and then they built a great business. Everyone is just figuring it out. Like no one ever feels like they made it. No one ever feels like this is the pinnacle, this is the peak, like I cannot do any better. No one ever thinks that.
Yeah.
No one ever thinks that. So if you know that everyone else is just trying as they go, and even native speakers feel some sort of complex from time to time about how they speak or how they sound, we're all on the same page. It's just who's willing to say, yes, I'll try, even though I'm a little scared.
That's exactly that. And also, it doesn't make sense that anybody compares with, it's like a completely different play. Like, I think for me, it really helped if I don't compare myself with native speakers, in the sense of, I think it's a total different reality. It's like we are playing different roles in the movie. Like, my goal is being intelligible. And then it's like, I have this is what you say, my signature is unique, and my international English is unique. And it's great. And yes, I have to. So it's kind of playing a musical instrument. You have to tune the instrument right in the orchestra. But then you are a violin, and the other one is like, the drums, and the other one is, and it's perfect. Like, it's okay. We don't have to be the same instrument, but everybody has to tune their instrument into the right note for the song to work. So for me, it's the way I see it with international communication. That's why for me, it's even to train people in oratory in English is even more fun, because it's more like acting in my way of perceiving it, or the way I've always perceived the skill, because I've been trained in acting or cinema and like storytelling and like impersonating, in making like this kind of playing make-believe thing. So for me, it was always, okay, I put myself into character. And now I speak, because like actors, when there is something that help you put into the character. So for me with English, it's like, this is my international persona. And it's like, kind of, I feel like I'm a different person. I feel like I access a different experiences. And I give myself permission to do it. And I think for many people is what they need. Like exactly what you just said. It's like, give yourself permission to make mistakes and try and find your voice, because you are creating a new voice. And because it's very creative, you have to try things that are not going to work, and then others are going to work, and understand what it means. I think for many Spanish people, they don't even have somebody training them on that. So then they feel that, oh, it's because I'm not good at it, or it's because, I need more vocabulary, or the advanced certificate exam or whatever. And no, it's a totally different game that you're playing, because you're playing oratory. So I hope that with this podcast, people understand a little bit better what is it that we do, and that we train people in, and like, the solutions that you can find going through this process, and also that it's very fun to do it. It's really fun to create your voice in a second language, and you have done that with Spanish. And I'm sure that you have a lot of stories that we're gonna do more podcasts on with Kayla, so that you're gonna share more on creating your voice, and in my case, creating my voice in English. And how, for me personally, what helped me the most was oratory, because once that I have the grammar, the vocabulary, it's all about techniques that many actors use, public speakers use, even skills that people in sports use, like managing your stress, emotional intelligence, is what you said about your beliefs about yourself. So I hope that everybody listening, you get a little understanding, or you get a little introduction into what international oratory is about. So going into the end, Kayla, if you want to share with the people where they can find you and everything that, for people to get in touch with you and what you're up to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. First, I'd love to share a really great example from Anna here for the audience, because I think that it's really concrete and it'll be a really great example that people will learn from.
Great.
So all of these skills that we're talking about, the great thing about them is that they are something you can take across languages. So if you have a really great skill that's worked for you in one language, you can leverage it and use it in another, but you don't know how to leverage it or use it if you don't recognize what the pattern is and have someone, help guide you in how to apply it. So something that Anna has done multiple times in this podcast that you guys will have listened to is that she will use metaphors or analogies or comparisons to explain ideas that not everyone might be familiar with. So she's used it in multiple ways. She said, people playing an instrument, we can play different instruments. We don't have to play the same instrument, but we all have to tune our instrument to get the best sound. Or we're all in a movie, but we're playing different roles. I can't compare my role to your role. So she's done that multiple times throughout this. So having something that you recognize, okay, this is something that high level communicators do. They share analogies, share metaphors, they share comparisons. They use the power of three that you mentioned before. Once you recognize those, you can look out for them. You can try to find your own. What works for my industry? What works for my profession? And how can I apply it? So that's the kind of stuff that I love to do with clients as well. My specialty is this intersect between creating that fluent voice for yourself within your vocal signature. What does fluent mean to you? How do you perceive that? What is it that you want to take you to the next level? And oftentimes it's something that someone does really well in their native language, but they want to kind of bridge that gap. They feel like they need to take it just a little further in English and they're not sure how. And normally there's really clear patterns or practices that they can implement to help get them there. And then that intersects between that kind of confidence in communication with fluency and also with accents. So I'm a huge fan of the power that feeling really confident in our accent or pronunciation can help us feel, because that was the single most important thing for me that helped me feel a lot more confident in saying yes to things in Spanish that before were scary for me. When I knew that I sounded clear because I had trained myself on it, I understood it, and I changed my accent, having learned as an adult with no exposure to Spanish as a child, that was a very empowering thing for me. So to be able to help people change their voice in the way they choose to, not because someone else tells them they have to, but because they're designing what their voice gets to sound like, their own signature. That's really fun for me. So you can find me on Instagram. I'll have Anna share all the social handles on Instagram. I'm Kayla Arroyo Belush. On YouTube, I'm going to try to be on there more. I'm actually doing a series right now on YouTube of a 30-day communication challenge that I'm doing with myself, which is really fun. And you can also check out my website for the kind of services that I offer at ambientiumgroup.com.
So I'm going to share all of that in the description so you can find Kayla. And also we are going to offer a very special thing that you have to be up here and follow the next podcast, because we're going to do a little series, more conversations we're going to have on international oratory, English communication oratory, and all of this that we're just talking about. We're going to do some more series on this. And then we're going to, there is something that we're going to offer together, the both of us. So keep in touch here because we're going to be coming with very interesting new things the next couple of weeks. And with this, I have much more things to say, but I'm going to wrap it up, Kayla, for today. Thanks a lot for coming. And I'm going to be seeing you very soon for much more things on this incredible skill that we are talking about on communication and public speaking.
Thank you, Anna. It was a pleasure, as always.
Bye.